Here to tell us more is Congressman Andy Biggs. He was present yesterday for this important hearing. Congressman, good to have you back with us, sir.
Yeah, Vince, thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
And I got to be honest, every time I see you in one of these venues, I think, oh, thank goodness Congressman Biggs is there, because you're such a reliable reporter on these events, and we like talking to you about them. So tell us, if you will, what are your top-line takeaways from this important hearing yesterday?
Well, there's a bunch, but first of all, that there's systemic failure. So we all know that from the Secret Service, but it wasn't just a few pieces of action that were not done properly. This was system-wide. I mean, this was everything from why did you choose the perimeter boundaries that you chose? Yeah. Why did you not even have a counter surveillance unit on scene? Why did the Secret Service not show up at the briefing at 9 a.m. at the morning of? Why did they refuse to take the communications radios that the local communications center was providing to everybody? I mean, this becomes it's system-wide, but it's not just there, Vince, when we start thinking about it. It isn't just the failures of July 13th. It is also a kind of an overarching DEI initiative that was put in place under the Biden administration with former Director Cheadle. And their deal was to DEI is it. I mean, and now Homeland Security, they're talking about DEI. So the overarching is that there was a cultural problem within Secret Service, but moreover, there's system-wide lack of preparedness. And it's so great that you look at it and you say there were so many failures here. Was this willful negligence? Was it actual intentional? Was there some kind of bias going on? And we have to get to that, too, because it's part of the whole thing why we don't trust our institutions in America anymore.
Exactly right. And this is why so many people walk away from this and they go, how could this be an accident? That this cascading series of failures is just too insane. And so the best case scenario, it seems at this moment, unfortunately, is we're dealing with a shockingly incompetent agency who is tasked with some of the most important security jobs on the entire planet and are incapable of doing that with any efficiency.
Right, exactly. And so it's a $3 billion agency, right? And they've got their mission is distracted, right? So they're now checking on counterfeit money. Now, that's not where they are. They're not police investigators. They are protectors. They are to protect some of the most threatened individuals in the world. I mean, Donald Trump. Who's more threatened in the world than Donald Trump? Perhaps the Pope. But other than that, is Donald Trump's going to be like number one on everybody's hit list, whether it's from foreign adversaries, domestic. And when you are paring down and going on the cheap, and you're actually bringing in agencies that are not trained for protective detail, you've got a major problem. And so when we started hearing that, I mean, obviously we knew much of that, but it was expanded on by you've got Ben Schaefer, who was on the scene. He was on the scene as a counter sniper. Then you get Dan Bongino, former Secret Service,
yes,
and Eric Prince, who's a security expert. I mean, you begin looking at it and you say there are so many major problems because they're distracted, Vince. They're not mission focused.
So there's also part of the hearing yesterday I mentioned at the outset was the fact that the shooter, Thomas Crooks, his body was cremated very rapidly, and as I understand it, before an official autopsy can be done on it. Like, clearly we seem to know the cause of death, which is a sniper who shot him in the head. But what's the rush to destroy the evidence from the crime scene?
Yeah, that's really problematic. They should not have allowed a cremation, and they also should not have been washing down and cleaning up the crime scene less than 72 hours after the incident, which is also, I mean, these are suspicious things. I mean, there's like, well, why are you doing that?
Well, it instantly makes me think of the cocaine in the White House. The Secret Service destroyed the cocaine in the White House and said, sorry, we can't investigate this any further. That's, again, to this day, that strikes me as corrupt, actually, frankly.
Right. Yeah. And on that's Cheadle. And so you actually had line agents saying we don't want to destroy that. We don't want to get rid of that evidence. And they have found what they've told me is, which I don't really yet fully understand, is a partial DNA trace. So the bottom line is they know whose Coke it was in the White House, right? But we don't have. They're not releasing that to us. And this is part of the problem. This is why. When Mr. Prince said yesterday, and I've been advocating this for a long time, as Chip and everybody else on that panel, you have to use your leverage, which is the money. The money, and you got to say we're not going to spend money on DEI, and we're not going to, we're going to have to eliminate certain positions until you start giving us the full story, give us the documents, give us the whatever it is we want. It works as a tremendous leverage tool that the founders of this country understood, which is why they gave it to the House of Representatives. And we just need more of my colleagues to understand that and basically tell Secret Service and other agencies that are withholding information from us, give us the information. We want to see it because the American people should have a right to know this.
Yeah, and this is just disgraceful. I mean, if you got a couple of junior police officers who handle crossing guard duties at a high school, they could have organized a better security plan than these guys did. The idea that they didn't have interoperable radio systems, that local cops panicking as they're yelling that there's a shooter on the roof can't be heard by the Secret Service, this is moronic. It is so far beyond fixable. It seems to me that we should just take it all down to the ground and build up something new because this isn't working, Congressman.
Well, there's those who've suggested that, and I mean, don't forget, the snipers were their backup plan if they had a failure, which they did have a failure on what the communications was, to go to texting.
Yeah.
Now, the sniper who testified, Ben Schaefer, the two technical guys on the committee who were both snipers, Eli Crane and Corey Mills, they all said, if you're texting, your eye is off the glass. You cannot keep focus on where you need to be focused when you're looking down and when you're sending pictures and having to receive pictures by text. It is absolutely, I mean.
And if you're 5'2" and the protectee is 6'4", you're not shielding him from bullets. This is obvious stuff, and it's really disgraceful that and it's another sign that, by the way, the government should be in control of anything. They can't even do the simple tasks they're required to do. Yeah.
And don't forget the water tower. The water tower is huge because it is by far the highest vantage point, and they didn't have anybody up there. And if you have somebody up there, they could have spotted that shooter immediately.
Or like a cherry picker. How many times have you gone to an event where they just have a lift and they just put somebody up in it,
Yeah. Well, I mean, lots of times. And we got into this, the security hold business. Why didn't they issue a security hold? I mean, if you've ever been with a president or vice president or something like that, it is not an unusual thing. If you see somebody that's kind of a suspicious person or a threat, they will stop. They will stop where they are. They wouldn't bring him out, but instead they put him, as they say, on the X. President Trump on the X, even though 30 minutes before the counter sniper receives information, they'd already identified the guy and they were trying to get that information around, but they weren't. Nobody was confronting the guy. Just so many failures. I mean, here's a 20-year-old kid. He's got the explosives in the car, but they can't find any kind of internet technological footprint. How this 20-year-old kid, was able to create sophisticated explosives in the car.
I'm worrying about that story because it feels an awful lot like the Vegas shooting. Like, this is going to go the way of the Vegas shooting. We're not going to know anything about him. We won't know his motivations. Everyone, all of a sudden, all the government entities tasked with investigating it, they're just like, well, this is a dead end. We're not going to ever find out. Oh well. These are some of the most consequential moments in American history, and I'm very dissatisfied with the answers we've been getting out of our government, which is a lack of answers.
That's exactly right. Which is why one of the reasons that we decided to run our forum yesterday is bring in some experts including a government expert who's, Ben Schaefer. It takes guts. I mean, he's an active law enforcement guy, but he came out because he had to get out and explain. There were things that the Secret Service was supposed to do, didn't do, and it gets back to the premise which is, how do you trust your government when your government they lie to you all the time about all kinds of things.
I know. Which is why, as you pointed out early in this conversation, so we take the best case scenario, which is that this is a series of cascading failures. The worst case scenario is something intentional was involved here on the part of taxpayer-funded resources, which is an awful thing to even contemplate. But of course, so many people are doing that, given what they've seen here. And the reason it's so awful is because what it means for the future of our country. That is a deeply destabilizing conclusion if we get there. And God willing, we won't. But, man, this cannot happen, can it, Congressman?
No, it can't happen. But it gets to the point, Mike Lee made this very soon after the incident. He said, look, when David and let's go back to the Old Testament. You got David and Bathsheba, right? So he has an affair with Bathsheba, and she gets pregnant, and he wants to destroy her husband. So he has him sent to the hottest spot of the battle that's going on in their war, and he wants him killed. That's kind of, it's not, nobody pulled the trigger. It was the enemy that pulled the trigger. But here's the deal.
Yes.
That kind of willful ignorance, willful negligence, whatever you want to call it, is still got intentionality behind it. And it gets to the whole thing. Why no counter surveillance? Why no counter sniper on that roof? Why did Jill Biden, an indoor event, who has no line of authority, she is not entitled to any protection other than the First Lady stuff. Why did she have 3 times as many Secret Service folks assigned to her that day as opposed to Donald Trump? I mean, why was there no drone? Why was there no drone floating overhead? Exactly. Looking at the crowd and everything, and just so many things that make it look like David and Bathsheba and that incident.
And you're arriving at the point that I've arrived at, and I've talked about a lot, which is that I think this is the cleanest way to understand this event at the very least, which is that the Biden administration doesn't take seriously the idea of protecting Donald Trump. Donald Trump, please, they hate everything about him. And the fact that they have to even give him a security detail probably disgusts them, but they have to by virtue of the fact that he's a former president. But if you're looking for evidence that they use the Secret Service in political ways, it's their treatment of RFK Jr. They refused to give RFK Secret Service protection because they didn't want to dignify his campaign as real. They didn't want to, and they saw it not as a means of protecting a candidate for public office. They saw it as a gift that's only given to people that we should legitimately consider as a political candidate, and they didn't want to do that for their opponent.
Well, absolutely, but I think contextually there's another aspect of this too. And Benny Thompson, member of Congress, actually ran legislation to remove Donald Trump's Secret Service detail. And from President Trump's family, et cetera. Yeah. This is one of the most threatened guys in the country, and this is what the Democrats do. They've done everything else they possibly could. It's total Trump derangement syndrome. They've done everything else they possibly could to stop him. Yeah. And then it was like, well, okay, now let's take away his security detail. If we could do that, maybe something bad will happen to President Trump.
Benny Thompson. Never would have seen that coming. I didn't know he was an out-of-his-mind Trump antagonist. I had no clue. He's a disaster. He chaired the January 6th committee. Ridiculous. Yes. What unbelievable. He never stops. Congressman Andy Biggs, you never stop joining us and giving us good intel on all of this. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you again, sir.